Good afternoon, metalheads, and welcome to another episode of Metal Sanctuary. And today we're going to do the band review of Motorhead. And appropriately, I have donned the Lemmy facial hairstyle as well as my Motorhead shirt for this. Um, Took me a while for doing this particular band review because um, for Motorhead, it's more than just trying to figure out a worst and first type thing with 30 something albums. It's kind of a stretch for me to do, but I think the main thing I'm going to focus on this band review is the importance of Motorhead, as well as when I got into them and how I got into them and so forth. Starting with how I got into Motorhead, I was in a gas station. I was probably about 20 years old, and I had heard of Motorhead before. Through a lot of the bands I listened to, especially like Metallica, claiming them as a really huge influence on them. And so I happened to be in this gas station, and there was a cassette for the 1916 album. And I looked at the cover, and it has the famous this here beast looking like thing design on there, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna give this one a shot. And that's got such a great amount of songs on there. You got Angel City in Brazil, Ramones, 1916, which I think is probably the best ballad by a metal band, talking about World War I and what it was like to be a soldier in those times. So that's how I got into Motorhead. And then I think the next one I got the CD of March or Die, which comes out around the same time as Ozzy's No More Tears. And the reason I mention that is because there is a song on No More Tears called Hellraiser, which Lemmy wrote for Ozzy, and he actually does his own version of the song on that Motorhead album. Listening to both tracks, I like the Motorhead version better, but I think the Ozzy version fits Ozzy better, I guess, if that makes any kind of sense. So that's how I got into Motorhead. They came out in a time in 1977 was when their debut came out, and Lemmy, who is the singer, frontman, bassist, he was in a band called Hawkwind at the time. I did a couple records with them, and then he was let go very unceremoniously, just kind of left at the gig, and they left, and he was left behind. And reports are because of his excessive drug use. The term Motorhead actually was something that that was known around that time in England as somebody who was doing speed a lot, and so I think that was might have even been one of his actual nicknames. But anyway, so he left He was fired from Hawkwind, started his own band, Motorhead. They come out in '77. This is a time where Judas Priest has already put out about 3 or 4 records. Sabbath has gotten about 6 or so. They come out just before the new wave of British heavy metal bands like Angel Witch, Tigers of Pantang, Def Leppard, Iron Maiden, Diamond Head. These bands that really start the rejuvenation of metal, because around this time in '77, between about '74 on up, punk was really big, and so these two brands of music, metal and punk, both kind of really getting a lot of their foothold in the mid to late '70s. So there was a big clash in the scene at that time between punk and metal. The punks didn't like the metalheads didn't like the punks. And Motorhead, due to their really raw and dirty sound, and of course you got Lemmy's not so clean vocals. Motorhead was like the band that the punks and the metalheads could both like at the same time. You could see punks at a Motorhead show and metalheads at a Motorhead show, where they wouldn't be mixed in any other kind of venue. So they come out in this time, and kind of Motorhead's also one of the biggest influences for thrash metal, because of their speed and the rawness. And you take a band like Motorhead, and you get bands that really weren't associated with the new wave, a band like Venom, who also kind of played a more evil style of Motorhead, basically. These bands, they help with, along with punk and new wave of British heavy metal, help form this thrash movement. A lot of the thrash bands, they're going to cite Motorhead as being probably the first thrash band, even though they were just a really fast metal band for the time. And for me, just in my opinion, thrash just kind of is on another level. There's a lot better musicianship in thrash, because they take the roots of what the new wave of British heavy metal bands were doing, having two guitarists, and in a lot of the thrash bands' cases, the lead guitars were switched between the guitarists. It wasn't just a lead guitarist and a rhythm guitarist. So Motorhead's a very important band for metal. And when Ron and I, Metal Ron, who some of you guys know, we were both working third shift at the same time. Him in Florida, myself in South Carolina, and we would we kind of had this game where we grouped some bands into different categories, and we would try to see which one of ours did, based upon a random playlist on our MP3 player / iPod, who could come up with a completion of all the different groups that we made. And one of them was the British Four, meaning the four main British bands. And they were Sabbath, Priest, Maiden, and Motorhead. And I don't think that you can discount any of their importance in metal that would come after. Like I said before, with about 30 or so albums, a worst to first for Motorhead just kind of wasn't really in the cards for me. Especially with a band like Motorhead. I listed Motorhead in my top 10 bands that didn't make a bad record. And the reason why is just because Lemmy was uncompromising. He was going to do Lemmy. He was going to do Motorhead. Motorhead albums were going to sound like Motorhead albums. You weren't going to have a whole lot of experimentation going on. So nothing that would really lead anybody to say, well, Motorhead's gone, or Motorhead needs to go ahead and pack it up. Unfortunately, earlier this year we did lose Lemmy, and that for me is among the biggest losses in music and in metal, just since I've been into metal. A lot of artists that died before I was really into it, people like Randy Rhoads, didn't have a significant impact on me, because by the time I was listening to Ozzy, he was already on the No More Tears record. But Lemmy, along with Dio and Peter Steele, fairly fresh for me. But anyway, so I will do a little bit into their discography. I just want to really look at the first 3 records they put out. In '77, they had their self-titled record, which had the songs Motorhead, Vibrator, Iron Horse, Born to Lose, and also their cover of Train Kept a Rollin'. These are really, really strong songs, are really just the indication of what Motorhead would stay always to be. Probably the best of these 3 would be their second record, which was Overkill, which came out in '79. The title track, Overkill. You've got Stay Clean, Capricorn, Damage Case. A couple of these songs are on the second disc of Garage Inc. that Metallica put out in '98, I think. They did 4. But, and there's a big correlation for the relationship between Metallica and Motorhead. Lars has stated on many occasions he would kind of tag along with the tour bus, and when they would stop, and he would stop to meet the band and see all their shows. 79's Bomber, which had the song Bomber. It also has my favorite Motorhead song, which is Sweet Revenge. Not a fast song, but it's still got that dirt and that grit to it, and that Lemmy voice that only Lemmy can do. Also, songs like Lawman and Stone Dead Forever. You could go on and look at any Motorhead album and pick out 5 or 6 songs right off the top that you go great songs. So, but Motorhead just had that quality about them that distinguished themselves from other bands. I kind of like to consider them the metal version of AC/DC. They had a formula, it worked. They kept putting out records. There's no lull in their career as far as being anything different and doing anything what would be considered sellout or anything. Very uncompromising, very very British, if you want to take that term. Lemmy led that lifestyle of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. We in the metal community would always joke, with the world ended, the 2 things that would be left would be Lemmy and the cockroaches, because nothing's going to kill Lemmy. Unfortunately, as we all do know, we are all mortal, we are human, and at some point he did have to pass away. It was just unfortunate that it happened in my lifetime. So there you go. There's my review on Motorhead. Comment, like, subscribe, tell your friends, stay metal, and God bless.